Hello friends, this is the fourth lecture from the series of news analysis. We are discussing about some of the issues that happened in the recent, those who were in the newspaper and that happened recently. So here first we are talking about the High Court judge appointment here. Why we are talking about it? Because the central government has just recently said that whatever the suggestions given by the Supreme Court Collegium regarding the appointment of the High Court judge, they will decide on it just 3 months. So with last 6 months, Supreme Court was giving so many suggestions to the government regarding the appointment of High Court judges, but government kept it pending. So now government said that in 3 months they will deal with all these appointments. High Courts currently have the 220 judges vacancies. So that's important thing here. That's the important fact. So the explanation here given is that how these High Court judges are appointed. These are appointed by the President of India first thing, and he is solely responsible. But solely responsible does not mean President take the decision. He consult with the Governor of the state, acting Chief Justice of India, Chief Justice of that particular states of the High Court. But CGI, when he consult with the CGI can formulate the opinion based on the collegium only. And the third judges said that CGI has to consult the two senior most judges if he wants to give suggestion to the President. So collegium system, here we are talking about the collegium system and the appointment of Supreme Court and High Court judges, because the collegium system is used to appoint the Supreme Court judges also and High Court judges also. So President has the power to make the appointment and transfer the judges between High Courts, but the President needed to consult with Chief Justice of India and Chief Justice of the High Court. So the collegium system actually come with this first judge's case, second judge's case and third judge's case. So the second judge's case which was mainly responsible. First judge's case said that when the President is actually consulting with the Chief Justice of India, the consultation is not interpreted as the concurrence. That's the important thing. Concurrence means the advice will be binding. Consultations means advice will not be binding. So first judge's case said that the advice will not be binding on the President. Second judges said that no, if the President consulting the Chief Justice of India and Chief Justice of India has given some kind of advice, then it will be concurrence. It will not just be consultation. That means the advice will be binding. And the Chief Justice of India will consult the two senior most judges. In third judge's case, it has said that Chief Justice of India will consult 4 senior most judges in the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court, and it will consult the 2 senior most judges if you want to appoint the High Court judges. So with regards to High Court, it is the collegium will consist of 3 people, CGI and the 2 senior most judges. With respect to the Supreme Court, it will be CGI and the 4 senior most judges. Collegium will have the 5 people. And the recommendation then sent to government and it forwards to President, then the President appoint the judges. So the question here is regarding the collegium system and who are the parts of this collegium system. Then option is one only, because Chief Justice of India is the part of this collegium system, and this all 2, 3, 4 options are wrong, because here talking about the 4 senior most judges. No, it is actually 2 senior most judges. We are talking about the High Court judge, not the Supreme Court judge. That's why it will be 2 senior most judges. Second statement is wrong. Then this Governor and Chief Justice of concerned High Court are not the part of the collegium. President consult them, that's it. But Chief Justice of India and only the 2 senior most judges of the Supreme Court will be part of the collegium to suggest the government regarding the appointment of the High Court judges. So answer will be A, one only. Then we are talking about the India-Australia. Why we are talking it regarding it? Because the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has recently said that India and Australia has to come together, they stand together and share the passion of democratic freedom and commitment. And he also focused on cooperation of the 2 countries in Indo-Pacific region. So that's why we are talking about India-Australia relations here. So first we will talk about the military relations. So there is a naval exercise which is called as AUSINDEX, which goes on between the India and Australia every year. Second thing, there is a Malabar exercise where India is there, Australia is there, USA and Japan is there. Actually Australia was not there, but just few months back Australia joined this Malabar exercise. So earlier it was just USA, India, then Japan joined, it became USA, India, Japan. Now Australia also joined, so it became USA, India, Japan and Australia. So all these Quad countries, that regarding the Quad we have seen in the previous lecture. So all these Quad countries are now the members of the Malabar exercise. India and Australia has also signed the Mutual Logistic Support Agreement. So they will use each other's naval bases for replacement and all that, and they will help each other with regards to any kind of a support at the naval bases. So that Mutual Logistic Support Agreement is going to work regarding that. India and Australia has also has same concern regarding the freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific region. So it actually targets regarding the China. So both the nations can, if they come together, they can act as a net security provider in this region. Here we are talking about the India-Pacific. So when we talk about the economic relations, actually India's export to Australia are around 4.6 billion. India's imports from Australia is around 11 billion. So there is a, in 1989 there is a one commission established which is called as the Joint Ministerial Commission. So that commission actually deals with the interaction of the government and the business level with regards to the trade and investment. Next, that the both countries are now currently discussing to have a cooperative economic cooperation agreement between these two countries. So currently we don't have this cooperative economic cooperation agreement, but now they are discussing to have it. So soon we will have an agreement between India and Australia which will be called as a cooperative economic cooperation agreement. Then there is a nuclear cooperation agreements also. It was signed in September 2014. Sorry. So uranium mining companies of the Australia will supply the uranium to India for the civil use. Australia has one of the biggest resources of the urea, and that is going to help the India. The question here regarding India-Australia relation, the answer is B, 2 only. That means the second statement is right only. India-Australia signed mutual logistics support agreement. That's the right statement. But the first and third statement here is, it talks about AUSINDEX, which is a Air Force exercise it is saying, but it is not an Air Force exercise, it is a Navar exercise. The first statement is wrong. Third, Australia had to become the member of Malabar exercise, it is saying, which is wrong because Australia is actually the part of the Malabar exercise. So only the second statement is correct, answer is B. Next it is talking about UNFPA report. UNFPA is actually United Nations Population Fund, and it publishes a report which is called as the World Population Report 2021. It has published it, and the theme of that World Population Report is My Body is My Own. Okay, so the theme is My Body is My Own. So the explanation, it is talking about the findings of the report. So what are the findings? It said that around half of the women in the 57 developing countries do not have right to make decision regarding their bodies. They don't have right to make decisions. That's the worrisome condition it is talking about. Next, only 55% of women are fully empowered to make choices regarding the healthcare and contraception. Again, a problematic condition. Then it says that only 75 countries legally ensure full access to contraception. So 25 countries actually not providing legally, not ensuring legally the full access to contraception. So regarding the violation of bodily autonomy, it has given the examples what can be called as a violation of bodily autonomy. So child marriage can be called as a violation of bodily autonomy according to the report. Lack of contraceptive choices which leads to unplanned pregnancy can be called as a violation of bodily autonomy. Next, like people with the diverse sexual orientation, that means LGBT community, transgenders, if they cannot walk the street without fearing the assault and humiliation, then it can be called as a violation of bodily autonomy. Then extra information is here regarding the United Nations Population Fund, that is established in 1967 as a trust fund, and regarding what, it is an agency to deal with the sexual and reproductive health in the United Nations. Next, it became operational in 1969, and UNFPA works as a subsidiary organ under the umbrella of United Nations General Assembly. So it's an UN agency. Definitely, almost all the organizations work under the subsidiary organ as umbrella under the United Nations General Assembly. So here the question is, the World Population Report is published by whom? And we already know it is published by United Nations Population Fund. The answer is C. Next is regarding the OCI card holder. OCI, Overseas Citizen of India. So government has eased some of the guidelines regarding this OCI, Overseas Citizen of India. So what are these new guidelines? That it says that the OCI, Overseas Citizen of India, does not require to register every time when he gets the new passport. So what's the thing? So suppose the OCI card holder has registered prior to getting the age of 20 years, then he has to register reissued of the OCI registration card. He will be given again after the completing the age of the 20 years. So he has to once again card has to be reissued after the completing the age of 20 years. But if the person got this OCI card only after getting the age of 20 years, then for his complete life he don't have to require to have a reissue of the OCI card. So that means if he is less than 20 years of age, he only single time after completing 20 years of age, the reissue of the card will happen. If the card he got after completing 20 years of age, for his lifetime he don't have to reissue the card. So whatever, if the new passport is given to that person, then all the details about the new, some of the password like photos and some of the identity documents and all that will be uploaded online within the 3 months of receiving the passport. That's the thing. So reissue of the card is not happening, only the data is getting updated online. That's it. So what are the overseas citizen of India? So Ministry of Home Affairs has already defined the overseas citizen of India, that who were the citizen on and after 26 January 1950, or who became the citizen on 26 January 1950, or who is a child or a grandchild of such a person who was the citizen of India on 26 January 1950. So that means if the applicant is according to the section 7, if the applicant is not eligible for OCI card if his parents belonging to Pakistan and Bangladesh. So people belonging to Pakistan and Bangladesh and their children, grandchildren, they cannot be considered, they cannot be eligible for getting that OCI card. So benefits of the OCI card holder, they can enter the India multiple times also. They are eligible to get Indian citizenship if they are the resident, they reside in India for 5 years at least. Then there will be a special immigration counter for OCI people at the international airport, and they can open a bank account also, they can buy the non-farm property, they can exercise ownership right also, and they can get the permanent account card number also, or a PAN card also. Limitations are, they cannot vote, they cannot hold government jobs, and they cannot purchase agriculture land. That's the thing. They can buy the non-farm land, but they cannot buy the agriculture land. And they cannot travel to the restricted area without the government permission. So the question here is talking about incorrect statement, and all the statements we have already seen, but only one statement is wrong, C, which talks about they cannot buy the farm and non-farm property. Actually they can buy a non-farm property, but they cannot buy the farm property. That's why the C statement is wrong. The answer is C. Next we are talking about the National Pension Scheme. So National Pension Scheme said that it is no longer compelling the investor to convert this 40% of their retirement corpus into annuity. So this new development that happened now, the investor which are invested in the National Pension Scheme, they don't have to convert compulsory 40% of their retirement corpus into annuity. Okay, so that's the new development happened, and it is said by the chairman of the Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority, which deals with National Pension Scheme. So the explanation here regarding that, the regulator is now will allow that saving up to 5 lakh can be taken as a whole amount after the retirement. They can take the complete 5 lakh from this National Pension Scheme once they are retired. Currently the limit is 2 lakh. And the Finance Ministry also declared in the budget 2019-20 that they are going to amend this PFRDA, and they will override this statutory annuitization provision about which the chairman of that PFRDA was currently talking about. So what is this NPS, National Pension Scheme? It is sponsored by government, started in 2004 for all government employees, but it was later extended to all citizens in 2009. So first it was started for the all employees, government employees only, then it was extended to citizens. It is voluntary also and long-term retirement scheme also. It is regulated by Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority and the central government. Next, the employees from public and private and even unorganized sector can opt for particularly this National Pension Scheme. Only exception is the armed forces. Armed forces are exempted from applying in the National Pension Scheme. And the eligibility criteria for opening is that citizen, he should be citizen, age limit 18 to 65, KYC compliant, KYC is know your customer, and he must not have the pre-existing NPS account. So 2 accounts cannot be there, only 1 account can be there. So benefits are they get higher returns on the NPS, and there are many investment options which are provided to the subscribers of the National Pension Scheme, and it reduces the retirement liabilities. So government has to spend less on retirement liabilities of the people, so it reduces the retirement liabilities of the government. Next, so question is regarding the following statement regarding the National Pension Scheme. 2 statements are given. National Pension Scheme and Pension Scheme started in 2004 for all government employees, including personnel from armed forces. This statement is wrong because I already told that armed forces are exempted. So this first statement is wrong. Then second, it is voluntary and long-term retirement scheme. Second statement is wrong. So answer is B, 2 only. That's the answer. Thank you so much. If you like this video, subscribe the channel, like the video, share the video, and give your suggestion on the comment box. Thank you so much.